If you watched my previous video, you might be thinking, okay, so what? Maybe cities in the United States are a little uglier now and you have to have a car to get anywhere, but living in mixed-use areas is expensive. I also don't want to live in a tiny box in the sky. In the United States, Canada, and many other suburban development-based countries, this is actually kind of true. Living outside the detached single-family home in a civic area is more expensive. There also aren't many other options when it comes to residential spaces. You either live in a row of detached single-family houses or in a giant skyscraper. There are hardly any other options. This can be seen in almost every American city. If I pull up an image of an American town, it's easy to find a bunch of low-rises and spread out towns, and right next to it, a horde of high-rise skyscrapers. It literally goes from 0 to 100. There's hardly any intermediary. However, if we look at other countries like the Netherlands or South Korea, the jump from spread-out developments to high-rise buildings is much more subtle, meaning there's a lot more housing variety to choose from other than the suburbs or skyscrapers. This scenario is called the missing middle problem. The term the missing middle describes pre-World War II type housing, such as courtyard apartments, duplexes, row houses, etc., which are now absent. It would be perfectly fine if this was the public's choice and if it was in high demand, but the issue is, this wasn't based off the public's choice. Euclidean zoning has made it almost impossible to build anything other than single-family homes. The New York Times stated that it's illegal on 75% of residential land in many American cities to build anything other than a detached single-family home. For instance, if we look at cities around the US, zoning for anything other than the single-family detached home is minuscule. The residential land marked in pink is for detached single-family homes. The marking in blue is for any other type of housing. In Minneapolis, Minnesota, residential land for the detached single-family home consists of 70%. In Charlotte, North Carolina, it's 84%. In Portland, Oregon, it's 77%. In Sandy Springs, Georgia, it's 85%. And in Seattle, Washington, it's 81%. Single-family units acquire much more space than multi-family homes, and since there's only so much surface area that can go around, every new development is going to be a fight. The combination of our growing population and our residential land scarcity leads to housing getting more and more expensive. California has been famous for its unaffordable housing. If we take a closer look at some of the cities here, we can see how dominated they are by detached single-family housing. In Los Angeles, it's 75%. And in San Jose, it's 94%. The sections that authorize any other type of housing are so small here, you could hardly even see it. With such little leeway towards alternative affordable housing, people have been leaving California in droves. Obviously, there are many other variables that affect the housing crisis, but a big factor is how we build homes in the first place. With competition for apartments and other rental units, many poor families find themselves priced out of housing. A variety of housing options provides more choice in the housing market. I mean, if we look at this logically, the bigger the home, the more expensive. But if we cut it up in pieces to fit more families, its price drops, allowing more autonomy for people to choose what type of home to live in and permitting spaces that aren't just the suburbs or skyscrapers has so many advantages. From finances to accessibility, variety is essential. Not everyone wants to live in a big house and drive to do just about anything. So, if we adjust our system to make it easier to live in more middle ground spaces, what else can we build other than the suburbs or skyscrapers? There are so many alternatives when it comes to city design. Allowing more variety could grant spaces like this small town, or this mixed-use community, or main streets like these. But, thanks to Euclidean zoning, building environments like this is almost unattainable. As I said before, some of the most enjoyable areas in cities are mixed use or traditional development. If you want to learn how our communities became unwalkable and disconnected, watch my first episode of The Suburban Crisis, where I explain Euclidean zoning and how our communities became the way they are now. With such an excessive amount of detached single-family homes, it makes it almost impossible to enjoy the traditional walkable neighborhoods. Since it's no longer feasible to expand our attractive mixed-use spaces, places like these are becoming more and more scarce. Areas like city centers and downtowns are becoming much sparser, and with its high demand, are becoming more expensive. And the reason it seems like the only type of multifamily unit houses we see are skyscrapers is because developers know getting zoning approval is expensive, competitive, and strenuous. So, logically, to make up for these struggles, they need to make maximum profit, which is done by cramming in as many residents as possible. High-rise buildings are expensive because of the upkeep of maintaining a high-rise is constant, and the cost to replace a roof or another large maintenance item is much higher. They are also more resource exorbitant. Sustaining a skyscraper or high-rise requires a multitude of assets like staff, amenities, etc. The housing crisis is becoming worse and worse every year. And the ones facing, or that are currently facing, its most severe consequences are the younger generations like us. Even though some people don't like multifamily units, it's unjustifiable to condemn these kinds of homes in almost every neighborhood in the US. But I want to make it known that this video isn't anti-suburbs. If you like living in the suburbs, that's fantastic. Everyone has a preference, but the goal is giving people a better chance in living in a home that fits their needs.